I'm Hallie Jackson in Washington, and right now we've got new reaction from President Trump on the phone interview with NBC News. As we've learned today, 3 U.S. service members have been killed in that operation to attack Iran. President Trump tells NBC that he expected casualties with this operation, but he says in the end, it's going to be a great deal for the world. The president also says Iranian officials are talking to the U.S., but would not commit to halting the strikes with these talks if they happen. It's not clear how those troops were killed that we've referenced, but 2 U.S. officials say it happened in Kuwait. And this morning, some new images from the region. Look at this, some new videos coming into us over the last few hours. With this war already escalating, Iran has extended its strikes to hit the UAE, to hit Bahrain, along with Israel. And take a listen to this. Those are the sirens in Jerusalem, and you see this, the aftermath of a strike at a town not far from there, where Israel says at least 9 people have been killed. I want to show you Tehran now from within just the last couple of hours. Look, you see that. Well, this is the scene, obviously, at that town in Israel. We'll take you over to Tehran now, where you'll see a plume of smoke billowing in the air. There it is. That is coming into us just from today. It's not clear if it is from an Israeli strike, but we know that strikes have been promised, have been threatened by the Israelis into the heart of Tehran. Our producer in the Iranian capital also reporting hearing massive explosions there. That's in just the last couple of minutes. Iranian state media also reporting that more than 150 people were killed in a strike on a girls' school in the southern part of the country. NBC News cannot independently confirm that. As Iran scrambles to figure out what's next after the killing of the Ayatollah there, the Iranian foreign minister says a new leader may be selected in the next day or two. A lot of questions, a lot of reporting coming in really by the minute here. And we've got our team fanned out across all of it. You see Courtney Cuby there, our Pentagon correspondent, our Richard Engel and Keir Simmons in the region. But I want to start with Julie Sirkin, traveling with the president in Palm Beach. He is down in Mar-a-Lago, Julie. He is set to return back to Washington, but not before he's been taking apparently a flurry of phone calls from reporters, including our own Peter Nicholas here at NBC News, literally in the last maybe 20 minutes, Julie, and was asked about, obviously, the deaths of these 3 U.S. service members, among other topics.
A fantastic interview by Peter Nicholas, getting really critical answers to key questions. Hallie saying the president is that they are ahead of schedule, he says, because he says they have killed senior leaders in Iran in this operation. As you said, he acknowledged that 3 service members were killed, 2 sources telling NBC News that happened in Kuwait. He said yesterday, the president, in his statement, there would be casualties. That was something that members of Congress had paid attention to, especially Democrats who want to try to rein in the president's powers there. On war powers as soon as this week. Also, the president telling Peter Nicholas that there are many outcomes that are good. He said number 1 is decapitating the entire leadership of Iran, the regime. He says there are many, many outcomes. The president did. He said we can do this. The short version or the longer version, you see some of those quotes there on your screen. The president also, Hallie, admitting and opening up, revealing, pulling back the curtain that they are talking still to Iranian counterparts. Many of those officials, the president acknowledging, are dead in these strikes. So there are still some, the president says, that are talking. He says they want to talk, but so far the president saying those talks are not yielding much progress. And then my personal favorite at the end of this interview, Hallie, telling Peter Nicholas, I have to go, I'm with the generals. So very significant comments from the president as he, of course, spends the day in Mar-a-Lago.
And a lot of questions, too, Julie, about what if these talks are happening, and perhaps if they happen down the road, whatever that the president's addressing, who those conversations are happening with, what would be any kind of outcome of those conversations, especially given what we've heard from our producer there in Iran, massive explosions today. I mean, within the last couple of minutes. This is a very active military operation on the part of Iran here.
Very active indeed, Hallie, and of course the president saying that this is an operation that is going to be ongoing and it is going to be massive, at least telling Kristen Welker even yesterday that he expects this operation to last through the coming days, through the next week. And of course, he put a lot of the onus on the Iranian people, telling the protesters there that there is no time like now to rise up to try and overthrow the regime. But still, it is something clearly that the U.S. is very much involved in. There is live fires. You've talked to our Richard and Keir overseas going on right now, live attacks in Israel and against U.S. bases in the region. And of course, we know the 3 casualties at least, because several others are wounded. And again, Just to bring it back to the U.S. here and to D.C., because the president is going to head back there later today, Hallie, he's going to have to face all of these questions. I'm told there are briefings that are being worked on, being arranged now with members of Congress who have a lot of questions that an act of war evidently was taken without their input. And so that is going to be something that the president is going to face. Again, Republicans control the Capitol, so we'll see how much success that piece of likely messaging legislation would have. But he would also have to face, of course, his base and Republicans who want to hear how this operation was America first, how the president defends and explains it. And we are still waiting to find out whether the president, Hallie, plans to address the nation after the killing of the supreme leader and, of course, after these 3 troops were killed.
Julie Sturkin, live first there in West Palm Beach. We'll see the president when he comes back to Washington later on tonight. We'll see if he speaks to members of the media. Jules, thanks. Let me get to Richard Engel, who's live for us in the region in Tel Aviv. So give us a sense of what it's like on the ground, Richard. I know that it seems like sirens have been going off basically all day and night. And then, of course, the report of those, what are being described by our team as nonstop attacks on Tehran right now.
So I'll start with the mood and what is happening here in Israel and then widen it out. So there have been several attacks by Iran carried out against Israel today. Generally, the Israeli missile defense systems were effective and stopping nearly all of them. We heard the air raid sirens here. We saw the interceptors go up into the sky, explode, and stop incoming Iranian barrages. But just a short while ago, I was in the town of Beit Shemesh, which is north of Jerusalem. It's an ultra-Orthodox community. And right in the center of Beit Shemesh, there was a missile attack. A single Iranian ballistic missile struck a home. It obliterated several of the surrounding houses. According to police and local officials who were on the scene, and there were many rescue workers there searching through the debris, hoping to find survivors, trying to secure the area, looking for unexploded ordnance. There were at least 9 people killed in that attack, making it the single deadliest attack that Israel has seen since this war began. And if you pull up pictures of the scene, you can get a sense of how much damage a single ballistic missile can do. Israel talks about how that ballistic missile was packed with about 1,000 pounds of explosive. And some of the victims, according to witness accounts, were inside a bunker at the time. But the bunker was not able, apparently, to withstand that much force. And according to another Israeli official on the scene, the bodies were in such a poor state that it was impossible to identify if they were men, women, or children. There are civilian casualties here in Israel. There are also civilian casualties now in Iran. You mentioned that girls' school. The death toll, we haven't been able to confirm it exactly, but according to Iranian officials, the death toll is over 100, many of them schoolgirls. The U.S. military says it's investigating that report. And now we also have the first American casualties, these 3 American service members killed, as you were just reporting, apparently in Kuwait.
And Richard, when the president says to our team here that we could do the quote-unquote short version or the longer version, all of the reporting, all of the indications thus far has been that on the part of the U.S., this is an operation that we should be thinking of in terms of weeks and not just days here. So can you give us any sense, any analysis here, as you've spent so much time in the region, of a timeline on something like this? Clearly, the president is prepared to keep up this operation for an extended period of time, although he's dangling the possibility that it could be over sooner than expected.
It's very difficult to know what the timeline is because President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu here in Israel seem to be basing the end game, the exit strategy, on the willingness of the Iranian people to take to the streets and their ability to occupy government buildings, to take over the government. And so far, they have not been able to do that. There were huge demonstrations in Tehran this morning. If you find that image, it is truly striking. There were perhaps hundreds of thousands of people in Tehran's, one of Tehran's main squares, showing solidarity with the regime, expressing their grief and mourning for the late supreme leader of the country. So the government of Iran absolutely weakened, It still does have its supporters. It is still able to launch attacks against Israel and at Gulf countries across the Middle East. And at this stage, we have not seen any significant demonstrations. There have been some images coming out of Iran of a few people celebrating, a few people dancing after they heard the news of the death of the supreme leader, a few people shouting anonymously into the dark from their rooftops, but not the kind of street demonstrations that would indicate massive unrest or the kind of uprising that could bring down the government.
And all of it, Richard, as there is this question of leadership now in Iran moving forward. We've heard from the Iranian foreign minister suggesting, obviously, since this operation began, that Iran will do whatever it takes to defend itself. There's this sort of temporary council, so to speak, in place. And then the indication from Iranian state media that they have there has been essentially a succession plan in place, that they are prepared on the chain of command.
The succession plan is underway to a degree, and there is now a three-person council running Iran. They have the authority of the supreme leader. They are now empowered with choosing a new leader, but Israel has been not just attacking missile sites, not just attacking military facilities, but Israel is specifically going after senior Iranian leaders. And according to Israeli media, quoting Israeli military officials, they have killed about 40 different top-level commanders in the Republican Guard, people who were advisors to the supreme leader, people who potentially could have been the next supreme leader. So they are in a succession process, but Israel is continuing to eliminate possible candidates who could have filled the supreme leader's role. To go back to your earlier question, how long does this go on? This may be the easy part. It is easy to destroy a country. It is easy to not destroy a military. It is far more difficult to rebuild something that is stable and provides stability not just for its own people, but for the region.
Richard Engel, live for us there in Tel Aviv. Richard, we are glad to have you, as always, in a moment like this. We appreciate your reporting, and I know you're staying close there as we look for more on NBC News. Thank you. I want to get now to our senior national security correspondent, Courtney Kube, who covers the Pentagon for us. So let's start with what Richard referenced there, and that is the potential of, obviously, the destruction of the Iranian military, at least steps toward that. It sounds like we had known about one Iranian naval ship that had been destroyed. The president, in just the last couple of minutes, is now out on Truth Social. And again, most of the communication we've seen from the president has been, I think all of it, either on Truth Social or in these phone interviews with reporters, saying that I've been informed we've destroyed and sunk 9 Iranian naval ships. He says they're going to be floating at the bottom of the sea. He says we've also largely destroyed their naval headquarters. Do we have any sense, Courtney, of independent confirmation of that from elsewhere? What do we know about this piece of the operation, if anything?
We don't. We don't know if that's true. I mean, we do know that, as you mentioned, there was at least, CENTCOM is saying that one Iranian naval ship, it's known as a corvette. If you've had to think about a U.S. ship and try to compare it, it's sort of close to a destroyer in that it has a missile capability, it has cruise missiles, it has land attack cruise missiles. So it's closest to that, but not exactly the same. Anyway, it is an Iranian military ship, often operated by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. It was sunk, according to CENTCOM, in the Gulf of Oman. It sounds like it was in port at the time. But that's the only one that so far we're hearing about from the U.S. military. I will say, look, President Trump has been out ahead of the military in announcing some of these things. Sure. So we're asking the question, but that's all we have for now. Also, we have asked the question about his allegation in that the U.S. has also struck the Iranian military's naval headquarters. There have been hundreds of targets that the U.S. has struck inside Iran. So that, again, is also possible. We just don't have any unilateral verification of that. Remember, Hallie, in his video, so the only time we've actually seen the president on camera since all this began, that Truth Social video from 2:30 in the morning yesterday, he said that he intended to annihilate the Iranian Navy. So this does appear that this is part of the effort to do just that.
There's also, I mean, you talk about the strikes by the U.S. on Iranian assets, too. CENTCOM tweeted out that B-2 bombers have struck Iran's ballistic missile facilities.
Yeah, that's right. And that's not surprising. I mean, candidly, that's one of the things that we were waiting to see is would they bring in long-range bombers to be a part of this? You'll recall they did so back in Operation Midnight Hammer. We've seen them used. They have a unique capability that they can fly for a really long time. We're talking like 30-plus hours in the air and then drop this enormous payload. So this is one of the most challenging, in what is a very challenging military operation here with all these different objectives. Going after the ballistic missile program is extremely difficult because it is dispersed around the country. The launchers, which is really one of the main things you want to hit here, they can have as many missiles as they want, but if they don't have the ability to launch them, they're not really any good. So they want to go after the launchers, but they are mobile, many of them, and they're dispersed. That is a difficult mission and a difficult operation. It's hugely logistically challenging. So I'm not at all surprised they'd bring in bombers to be a part of that.
We've also learned today about the deaths of those U.S. service members. 3 American troops killed, 5 others hurt, at least at this point. And you've learned a little bit more about the circumstances around that?
Yeah, and some others that were injured but appear to have been not as serious and returned to duty. The military explaining them that these are people who had shrapnel wounds and maybe some concussions. So we do know now that this was an attack that occurred in Kuwait. The U.S. military has a pretty decent-sized presence in Kuwait. There are several different bases there. Ali al-Salem, which is a combination of Army, Air Force, Marines. It's all different services. And then there's 2 other bases that are specifically U.S. Army. We know that the individuals involved were assigned to a sustainment unit. That basically means that they did logistics and support, but we're still working on more details. The government of Kuwait has been pretty open about the huge barrage of projectiles that Iran has launched at them. Almost 100 ballistic missiles, more than 280 drones so far to date. We just aren't sure exactly which one of those may have been responsible for this attack that, as you said, killed at least 3 American service members, injured seriously 5 others, and then others were injured but appear to have been returned to duty or not as seriously.
Courtney Kube tracking all of it for us. Court, thank you very much. I know you are also staying close to a camera, too. Appreciate that. Let me go to our Chief International Correspondent, Keir Simmons, who's live for us in Dubai tonight. Okay, Keir, so let's talk about then what happens from here with so many questions as we've laid out still ahead. First, you've got Iran escalating its attacks elsewhere in the region here. We mentioned that at the top of the broadcast here. Strategically, there have been some questions about why Iran would do something like this, considering the high possibility, the high probability, in fact, that this backfires, essentially. Explain that.
Yeah, I mean, effectively what Iran is trying to do, if it does have a strategy, and remember it's without its supreme leader and without many of its leaders, is sow chaos. You heard those numbers from Courtney there. Well, here, the numbers are even higher in the United Arab Emirates, with almost 200 missiles fired, according to the UAE, and more than 500 drones. So most of them have been intercepted extraordinarily. This country and many of these countries have invested hugely with American support in air defenses, and it's working. That being said, 3 people have been killed here. Tens have been wounded, and it's a shock here because this is a vibrant, growing economy, huge tourism economy. You know, I spoke to a couple from Tennessee just this afternoon, sheltering in a hotel here in Dubai. They were here for their 20th wedding anniversary, and they are stuck. And they've got 3 kids back home that they're worried about. They're frightened. And they showed me a video on their phone that they took last night of munitions exploding just outside their hotel. They have not experienced anything like this. They are well traveled, but this is something different for them. And many people here in Dubai and in the UAE will be feeling the same way. It's like, I don't know, it's like missiles raining down on Miami. I will tell you that over this weekend, it was explosion after explosion here, Hallie, and through the night too. My family are sheltering in place in our house. I'm just outside the house here. I could literally step inside at any moment. And the explosions this morning, there were 2. I think I heard another one in the distance. It's this: you get mind games where you hear something. Yeah. Is that a munition? And if it is that just air defenses working? Because a lot of these noises are air defenses working, or is it something else? There were 2 this morning, one loud, one even louder and vibrated. And there is a air base about 20 miles south of Dubai. commercial airport has been hit. Thankfully, it was evacuated. That's a short distance from here. The commercial airport in Abu Dhabi has been hit. Back to your question at the top here. Are the Iranians deliberately targeting the civilian infrastructure? Civilian airports being hit suggests they are. Hotels being hit may have been a mistake. But this is what the Iranians were threatening, which is to say that if they were targeted, if it was regime change that they faced, that they would just unleash all hell on the region with the hope that it would make it so difficult for the Trump administration, so difficult for the US and Israel, so much chaos and so much pressure from allies and partners that they would have to back down. I mean, that effectively is what the Iranians are trying to do. It is desperate, but it may prove to be effective.
All of it, Keir, as there are questions, of course, around Iranian leadership moving forward. We touched on this a little bit with Richard Engel just a second ago, but we've got President Trump now this morning, Keir, in these conversations. And if you need to duck inside, you tell me, obviously. But with President Trump in these conversations,
no,
with
it's
reporters this
honestly,
morning.
we're fine. We're really fine here. I'll tell you, the worst thing that can happen, Hallie, here is if a missile gets intercepted and the debris drops on you. That bad luck, wrong place, wrong time. But I'm undercover here, so it's
good.
Thanks for your concern.
I wanted to make sure.
Please, I interrupted your question.
But President Trump suggesting that he is saying and telling one outlet that is perhaps 48 senior leaders on the Iranian side have been killed in this operation by the U.S. and by Israel here. You've got questions around sort of the chain of command, the line of succession, and some new reporting from NBC News here from one of our colleagues, Dan DeLuce, that the CIA, before this aerial attack, had concluded that if, in fact, the Ayatollah had been killed in the assault, he could be replaced by equally hardline officials inside the regime. So more hardliners essentially in place. I want to just preface by saying all very much an open question, and we know that what happens sort of inside those discussions is extraordinarily opaque here, but it is something that is going to be significant to how this all unfolds in the days and weeks to come.
Yeah, and, I could stand here in the region talking to you there, Ali, and we can talk about all of the dark, terrible things that could happen, and they could. You're right. Hardliners taking over who are even more enthusiastic about trying to build a nuclear bomb. One option. Hardliners taking over, and they still have that enriched uranium, 60% enriched uranium.
Right.
Where is that in Iran? What would happen to that? All of those questions. But then another point could be the disintegration of the country with different ethnic groups trying to take different parts of it. Chaos, like civil war. That's another possibility. And then there is the possibility that there is a people's uprising. It's likely to be violent, but that in the end, a new leadership wins out. Another option is that right now the Trump administration could be talking to those inside the regime, inside officials in Iran who want the end of this and may already be discussing how to move forward. But all of these things are possibilities where, as you know, an organization like the CIA, an intelligence organization, they don't tell you for certain what's going to happen. They just lay out possibilities. And that's where we're at right now. It is impossible to know where the coming weeks take us. What I think is more certain is that, and we've talked about it in the past hours, Hallie, is what I think is more certain is that the oil price very likely surges tomorrow morning with the Strait of Hormuz, crucial oil and gas shipping lane, blocked. Not able to be used, and that they just announced, OPEC Plus just announced they're going to pump more oil into the system, and I think that's an indication of how much concern there is about a surge in the oil price and an impact on the world economy.
And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on. Keir Simmons, Keir, we're so glad to have you there in Dubai. Thank you very much for your reporting and your analysis. Appreciate that. I want to go now to our Meet the Press moderator, Kristen Welker, who's been in touch with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle about this military action now in Iran and what happens from here moving forward. Kristen, all of this, as we have heard from the president, you spoke with him, I know, less than 24 hours ago. He sounds like he's doing another round of phone calls this morning. Give us the sense of the landscape from Washington here. From Democrats, it sounds largely like criticism of what they have described as a quote-unquote war of choice. From Republicans, support for the president, especially from, of course, Senator Lindsey Graham.
Yes, Senator Lindsey Graham, one of President Trump's top allies, of course, was insistent this morning that this action will ultimately make Iran, that region, and the United States safer. Quickly to my phone conversation with President Trump on Saturday, Hallie, the big takeaway there, in addition to saying that the Iranian leader had been killed, the supreme leader, he also said that a number of its leadership structure had been taken out, and now we are learning, of course, from Israel that some 40 military commanders were killed. Again, that is according to Israel. We heard Senator Lindsey Graham with a full-throated support of this military operation, Hallie. But a number of key questions remain. You've been discussing them throughout the hour so far. What are the next steps? What's the strategy moving forward? What's the off-ramp look like? And does the president rule out putting U.S. boots on the ground? I pressed Senator Lindsey Graham on that. Take a look at part of that exchange. Does the president have a plan to guarantee that that happens?
No, it's not his job or my job to do this. How many times do I have to tell you? Our job is to make sure Iran is no longer the largest state sponsor of terrorism, to help the people reconstruct a new government, no boots on the ground. We don't own, you know this idea, you break it, you own it? I don't buy that one bit.
So that was a very notable admission there, Hallie, by Senator Lindsey Graham, saying that he doesn't subscribe to that idea that if you break it, you own it. Of course, that was an idea that was put forth after the Iraq War. Again, though, what you didn't hear in that answer, what is the strategy moving forward? His argument is it's up to the Iranian people to replace its leadership, that they need to take the lead on that. Is that realistic without putting U.S. boots on the ground? Again, he insists it is. He insists it is possible. But, Hallie, I think that's part of where the focus is going to be this week. As you know, the administration is going to be briefing more members of Congress. They, of course, did brief the Gang of Eight before these strikes. They're going to be holding more briefings, frankly, in the coming hours and in the coming days. And that's where the pressure is going to come from for these answers, Hallie.
And how about, Kristen, a direct message from the president to the American people at this point? Obviously, we heard from him in that online post, when this was all unfolding in the early morning hours of what it was yesterday, now Saturday morning, Kristen. He is in Mar-a-Lago. He's heading back today. Our Monica Alba has suggested, and again, we don't know, but he sometimes talks on Air Force One on his way back to Washington. Are you getting any sense from the folks that you're talking to that there needs to be more of a presence from the president to explain to Americans, now that we have service members who have been killed in this operation, the rationale here, which he addressed briefly at the State of the Union, but really only glancingly?
So that's a great question. I think that Monica's absolutely right. I would be surprised, Hallie, if we didn't hear from him in some form or capacity today. I think talking to reporters who are traveling with him certainly makes sense. The fact that he's holding this outreach with folks who are calling him this morning is a piece of that. But does there need to be a more formal discussion, address, presentation to the American people? Those are the types of discussions that are underway at the White House behind the scenes. How should President Trump address this with the American people? And I can tell you that a number of his allies are insistent, Hallie. He's got to make his case to the American people. He's got to explain what happens now that the Iranian leadership has been removed. You heard him touch on that during that videotaped message from Mar-a-Lago on Saturday, where he said that this is the best chance the Iranian people may ever have to bring about fulsome regime change, a different direction for their country. But what does that actually look like, and how will that be implemented? Those are the questions he has not answered. He's talked about off-ramps, but hasn't given specific details for how that would be carried out. So, Hallie, I think what's going to happen at the White House over the next few days is a robust discussion about how and when the president sells this to the American people.
Kristen Welker, our moderator of Meet the Press. Kristen, thank you very much. We're going to have much more breaking news coverage of the U.S. strikes on Iran. We're going to take you to our correspondent on the ground in Beirut with the latest reaction now from around the world to these attacks. That's coming up right here on NBC News Now. We are back now with our rolling special coverage here on NBC News after that operation to strike Iran. And obviously, as you might imagine, reaction from around the world. right now. I want to bring in NBC's Danielle Hamamdjian, who is live for us in Beirut. And Danielle, give us a sense of what you're seeing on the ground there. There's questions now about what happens with Hezbollah, questions about what happens with Russia and how they respond too.
Yeah, Hallie. Well, Lebanon obviously very much divided among sectarian lines, Christian, Sunni, Shia. But my impression so far, speaking to people, is that you'd have to be a hardcore Hezbollah supporter to be grieving Khamenei. Of course, Hezbollah, a Shia Islamist party that has been decimated really after months of war with Israel after the October 7th attacks. And earlier today, just behind me, on the other side of the bay, is a suburb of Beirut called Dahya. It is still very much a Hezbollah stronghold, and they held a rally. Thousands of people showed up to honor Khamenei, but that is not the sense around the country. Now, is Beirut going to be vulnerable to strikes by Israel? Well, the president here, Joseph Aoun, said that he had received assurances by the U.S. ambassador here in Beirut that Israel had no intention to escalate things, provided there was no hostile behavior coming from Lebanon. In other words, all eyes now on Hezbollah. Is it going to react? And if it's going to, how is it going to be supporting and to what extent it's going to be supporting Iran in its retaliation? We did hear from the leader of Hezbollah today, offering his condolences, as you would expect. And he said, on the assassination of Khamenei, we will fulfill our duty in confronting the aggression, and we will not abandon the field of resistance, no matter the sacrifices. I mean, nothing really stands out there. It's a lot of words, but no action really so far from Hezbollah, or what's left of it here, Hallie.
Danielle Hamamdjian live for us there in Beirut. Danielle, we're glad to have you with us in the region. Thank you very much. So, questions now about where this goes, what's happening inside Iran after the death of the Ayatollah. President Trump telling our NBC colleague Peter Nicholas that the strikes are what he called ahead of schedule in seeking to wipe out Iranian leadership. He has also, the president has, told Iranians, he said, take over your government. But the foreign minister has told NBC News yesterday, regime change is mission impossible. I want to bring in Senior Managing Director of Trends US and Associate Fellow with Chatham House, Bilal Saab, here to break it down for us. Good to see you. Thank you very much for being with us.
No problem. Good to have you.
Let's start with this timeline that President Trump is talking about here. This idea that perhaps things are, in his words, ahead of schedule. He has talked about taking out dozens of members, he has said, of Iranian leadership at this point. Can you help us understand how this temporary council that's in place to lead the country now might be navigating this moment in Iran?
Right. So there is a certain process, obviously, and whatever is written on paper in terms of who's leading the country right now. But then there's also de facto leadership. So let me talk about both because they're very different. The Leadership Council consists of three people. You've got the president, you've got the chief justice, and then you have a senior cleric who's part of the Guardian Council. Now, the Guardian Council of Tehran, the Islamic Republic, is a 12-person body that I think is the most influential political body in the Republic. It's the one that sort of vets political candidates. It's the one that overrides, legislation that's passed by parliament. So that's currently what seems to be leading this current crisis. But then I don't know when, actually. That's a very important question. When the dust settles, they're going to have to go to a, let's call them a panel of experts. Essentially, it's an assembly of 88 people. All of them are clerics. And their task is to come up with a successor to the supreme leader. If you ask me, who are the candidates right now, obviously nobody knows, but two likely candidates from what we're hearing are the very second son of Khamenei, and then the grandson of Ruhollah Khomeini, who is the grandfather of the Islamic Republic as established in 1979. Who knows who's going to be the next candidate, but you can imagine running a process like that under fire and fighting an opponent that is the most powerful military on the planet.
What about somebody then like Ali Larijani, who's sort of, it seems, responsible for the day-to-day nuts and bolts operation, more I don't know if I want to call it tactical operation of sort of the day-to-day of Iranian operations. How does somebody like that fit into play? Somebody who's seen obviously as having a tremendous amount of power, former IRGC head, et cetera.
Yeah, he's in the mix, obviously. He's there to advise, especially now when there seems to be quite a successful decapitation. There's not a whole lot of people left who are quite veterans and senior in decision-making who could speak English and who know international relations and all that. That's Ali Larijani, obviously knew quite well the nuclear file as well. But I wanted to also say really running the show right now are the RGC, those who hold the guns, those who are what we call the guardians of the entire Islamic Republic. And for how long, obviously, will depend on the very trajectory of the conflict.
What about this prodding from President Trump to the Iranian people to essentially rise up to take over? How do you see that landing?
Okay, well, easier said than done, obviously. It's more of a hope than a plan, frankly. The strategy all along was that the United States would degrade the military capabilities and the means of violence, the means of punishment in the hands of the regime so that they could lob that mission afterwards to the Iranian people, and then they can actually rise up again and take over. But like I said, I mean, easier said than done. There's still plenty of, militias, besieged militias in Tehran who could still kill a lot of people, arrest a lot of people, punish a lot of people, and they're not going to flinch. I mean, we don't know the exact numbers of what happened last time around, but at least in the dozens of thousands of people getting killed. And the regime is not going to hesitate. So, it's one thing to declare and communicate to the Iranian people to rise up, but to actually do it and not face retribution is something else.
So then what to you, Bilal, is going to be the next sort of most critical moment here, the next, let's say, shoot or drop, if you will, aside from obviously the continued military action that we are seeing both from Iran and from Israel and others?
Look, I don't know. We're hoping that excessive military pressure on the regime would lead to some kind of defections, and those people would take over. They would sue for peace with the Trump administration. But we're just in the beginning of the very beginning of this. I don't really expect that to happen anytime soon. I think that we're just still going to see a lot of, military confrontation, tit for tats, and then the Iranians banking on causing more American casualties. As you know, there's breaking news of the 3 American soldiers falling, and then 5 others critically wounded. So the more you see of that, the more the Iranians will sort of feel, a little bit more confident about the strategy of dragging on this conflict, regionalizing it, and then making sure that the consequences that they are suffering are felt by the entire world, not just themselves.
Bilal Saab, thank you so much for being with us, for your analysis and for your expertise. We really appreciate your time as you've been in our special coverage here on NBC News. From the potential of further protests in Iran to what we're seeing here in the United States, and that is demonstrations here. One of them supporting freedom in Iran happening as we speak in New York. They've started at the UN, the United Nations building. They're marching over to Times Square, where we've seen protests against U.S. involvement over the course of the last 24 hours. Valerie Castro is there. She is in the thick of it. She's joining us now from right outside that protest. Tell us what you're seeing, Valerie.
Yeah, Hallie, this protest is in contrast to what we were seeing yesterday. Those protesters yesterday were calling for the U.S. to not get involved in the conflict with Iran. But this march today, organized by local Iranians, thanking the United States. I've seen signs saying, "Thank you, President Trump, for freeing Iran." A celebratory mood, as you can see, people very happy over what they've seen since those strikes took place over the weekend. Again, very much in contrast to what we saw yesterday, protesters yesterday not wanting the U.S. to get involved. But again, a celebratory mood here, Iranians saying they are happy and hopeful that this means freedom for Iran. Hallie.
Valerie Castro, live for us there in New York. And Val, before I let you go, have you noticed anything? I mean, we've talked about the potential for security postures tightening here in this country. Have you heard or noticed anything in New York where you are?
Well, Hallie, we know the NYPD is closely monitoring all of the events overseas, like so many other law enforcement agencies, both at the local and federal level. And we want to show you the NYPD. They are here on scene. They are monitoring the events and say they have stepped up their visibility in various areas throughout the city, including houses of worship, diplomatic sites. We know they're outside the Israeli consulate and the Iranian mission at the UN. So certainly stepping up a visible presence just in case there are any potential threats of retaliation even though there are no known threats or plots at this time.
Valerie Castro, right there as that demonstration gets louder there behind her in New York. Valerie, thank you. We've got much more coverage right here on NBC News Now of that operation in Iran. We're going to sneak in a quick break, but we'll be right back. Quick turn now to some breaking news right here in the United States. At least 3 people have been killed, 14 others hurt in a mass shooting at a bar in Austin, Texas earlier today. Investigators are trying to determine if the shooting was the result of an act of terrorism or an individual with a mental illness, according to 4 people briefed on the matter. We should note here that all of this is based on the preliminary investigation. Of course, it can change as all of this moves forward. I want to bring in Priscilla Thompson for us, who has made her way, I believe, to near where the scene is. And Priscilla, we're hearing more from the governor on this too, right?
Yeah, Hallie, we are on scene. It happened at that bar just there where you see that red heart on the outside. And Governor Abbott just a short while ago releasing a statement in which he said, quote, "This act of violence will not define us, nor will it shake the resolve of Texans. To anyone who thinks about using the current conflict in the Middle East to threaten Texans or our critical infrastructure, understand this clearly. Texas will respond with decisive and overwhelming force to protect our state." Now, we should note that investigators have not made a connection between what is going on in Iran or anywhere else in the world with what has happened here overnight. But what investigators have said is that this suspect, while they are still working to determine the exact motivation, there were indicators on the subject and in his vehicle that indicate potential nexus to terrorism. And we know from my colleagues Tom Winter and Jonathan Dienst, according to 4 people briefed on this matter, that the gunman is believed to be a 15-year naturalized citizen from Senegal. Officials again saying that at this early stage they believe he is a lone actor, but this investigation is still ongoing, so we're still awaiting additional details there. Hallie?
Priscilla Thompson, we'll look for you and more of your reporting coming up later on tonight on Nightly News and, of course, on NBCnews.com. Thanks. We'll get back now to this breaking news coverage of those U.S. strikes on Iran. And listen, one of the big factors here, one of the factors here has been what happens with, and if we can zoom in on this map here, you're seeing the OPEC member countries and also the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, this critical location, critical for oil. This is a region that obviously is key to oil, and we're going to see those markets open later on today, with the expectation being that those prices are set to spike. Let me bring in our business correspondent, Ali Canal, with more on this. Ali, talk us through the dynamics at play here, because we're about, several hours, I should say, away from trading resuming, and a lot of question marks on that.
Yeah, oil prices widely expected to rise. We could see a spike of up to $20 a barrel. Now, if that occurs, that would push crude oil into that $80 to $90 trading range. It's been quite a bit of time since we've seen that. Now, you mentioned the OPEC Plus news increasing their production. This was widely expected. They provided a statement to NBC News saying that they will maintain full flexibility to support market conditions. So that's why you have some economists coming out this morning saying you shouldn't panic just yet. We have to wait to see how impactful this will be on prices. Considering the oil that we produce today, we produce a lot more oil than we have even in the past 2 decades. There's also about 90 million barrels just sitting on tankers throughout the world. So that provides a bit of a buffer. Then, of course, you have OPEC that can always come in there. So it's possible we could see a spike and then a stabilization once shipping resumes. But of course, as you just mentioned, that's a big question mark with the Strait of Hormuz, and any further disruptions we see there, that's going to have a prolonged impact on the price of crude.
Yeah, 20% of the oil that the world uses on a daily basis passes through the Strait of Hormuz. There's the obvious question about impact on gas prices, right? How long would that trickle-down effect take, Ali? And then, of course, the other, cargo that goes through the Strait of Hormuz as well, with 2 big shippers now saying they're not going to operate there right now for obvious reasons.
Now, when it comes to gas prices, the trickle-through effect can be pretty immediate. And you can think about it this way. For any $1 increase in crude, that typically translates to 2 to 3 cents a gallon for gas. So if we do see upwards of a $20 spike in crude oil, that can mean you're paying 60 cents more at the pump. At the same time, we do typically see gas prices rise around this time of year. You have more drivers on the road in those hotter months. You also have refineries switching to more expensive summer blends. So this could hit consumers all at once. Now, Iran itself, it's not a huge producer of oil, only contributes about 3 to 4% of that global output. It is heavily sanctioned. Its main buyer is China. So the direct impact on Iran, that's pretty limited. But you just were mentioning 20 million barrels that go through that Strait of Hormuz, roughly 1/5 of that global production. And it sits right on the southern border of Iran. So that is what experts are hyper-focused on.
Ali Canal, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. I want to take you back to the region now with a look at what's happening there. You've got, obviously, the explosions that our team has heard in Tehran, in Iran, over the course of the last maybe 90 minutes to 2 hours or so. You've got Iran expanding its attacks in the region as well to other Gulf nations, and questions about the military operation as the U.S. has previewed that this is something that could last for a period of time, perhaps weeks, not days, as you heard President Trump allude to in several phone calls with reporters just today. I want to bring in our NBC News military analyst, Colonel Steve Warren. And on the Iranian side, you now have this new statement here, Colonel, from the Iranian foreign minister suggesting that basically it doesn't matter if you hit our capital, that bombings there have no impact on our ability to conduct war. What may have an impact potentially, talk to us, the continued bombardment. We've seen B-2s try to take out some ballistic missile sites in Iran. The president of the United States has suggested that up to 9 Iranian naval ships have been taken out. They've gone after the naval headquarters. How do you see that operation unfolding?
Right. The operation is unfolding really, I think, so far, according to the plans that the Pentagon and others will have prepared. The idea right now is to pressure the Iranian war-making capability, right? As we continue to pressure that war-making capability while also decapitating their leadership and creating turmoil inside of their political world, but focusing on their war-making capability, as we continue to pressure that, as we continue to degrade that war-making capability, the Iranian calculus will change continuously. So right now, they still have capability, and that's what we're seeing them unleash really across the region. But that capability every single day degrades from 2 things. 1, just expenditure. They're shooting it, so they have less of it. And then 2, the destruction that American and Israeli forces are causing.
There's also now this new statement coming into us from the IDF that strikes today have targeted headquarters belonging to the IRGC, specifically intelligence headquarters and Air Force command centers. That is presumably to be expected at this phase of an operation like this, Steve?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. One of the other things that you always, when we talk about attacking their war-making capability, it's equipment, of course, missiles, bombs, et cetera, but it's also attacking their ability to organize, their ability to resupply, and their ability to lead and make decisions. So as we continue to degrade their leadership, the Air Force leadership, their intelligence leadership, presumably the Army and the Navy leadership as well, as those continue to degrade, you have increasingly junior people having to step up and try to make decisions that perhaps they're not prepared for, trying to organize under this immense pressure that they're already feeling. And then finally, wondering whether or not this is a business that they want to stay in.
We've also obviously, Colonel, have learned about the deaths of those 3 American service members in this operation here. All reporting, according to 2 U.S. officials, is that happened in Kuwait. You've got President Trump commenting on this to our Peter Nicholas here at NBC News today, suggesting that obviously casualties may be expected in an operation like this. When it comes to this kind of commander-in-chief moment for any president, sending U.S. troops into an operation like this, how does and how should a commander-in-chief be making the case to Americans about why he or she is putting troops in harm's way?
Well, you know, we have only history to look back on, right? Historically, American presidents, American commanders-in-chief have felt that it is very important for them to, as you said, make the case.
Yeah.
Presidents have felt that they need to explain to the American public how they are expending America's blood and treasure. These are words that we haven't heard in several years. America's blood and treasure, the sons and daughters, the brothers and sisters, the immense amount of taxpayer money that gets poured into operations like this. Historically, presidents have felt that they need to explain and even justify all of this to the American people. It remains to be seen if this president feels that that's necessary. So far, it's been a fairly light touch explanation. We have seen some of it during Operation Midnight Hammer in June of last year. We saw the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of War and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs step onto a podium and explain in great detail exactly what happened. We have not yet seen that in this operation. It remains to be seen if we will.
Colonel Steve Warren, thank you very much for your time and for your expertise, our NBC News military analyst. Appreciate that. Let me bring back in now our White House correspondent, Julie Sirkin, who is traveling with the president in West Palm Beach, Florida. And Julie, to the point that Steve was talking about a moment ago, the president speaking publicly to Americans. We saw some of that in the early, literally minutes of this operation about 36 hours ago. He will be returning back from Palm Beach, from his Mar-a-Lago home, where he oversaw that operation later on today, right?
Yeah, Hallie, he is in his Mar-a-Lago home. He is in Palm Beach. We know that. And one of the key questions, and the biggest questions really that I'm asking the White House right now, speaking of whether he will make that direct-to-camera address to the American people, given the death of the Iranian supreme leader, but most notably and most recently, the death of those 3 service members and potentially injuries of several more. The White House has yet to answer that question. We will potentially see the president, of course, later today as he heads back to Washington, D.C. He tends to gaggle, speak with reporters on the plane, potentially off the plane as well. And of course, they will have all of those key questions to ask him. But this is also because he will need to justify this, and his administration will, Hallie, to Congress. They are back in Washington early next week. They will not only be voting and taking up legislation that intends to restrain the president's further actions in Iran, Hallie, as we talked about, but they will also be asking many questions of the administration in private, in briefings, which I'm told are being scheduled right now as we speak, to try to find the justification that the administration is using, that they had to conduct these strikes right now, that there was an imminent threat to the United States. And that dovetails into how the president is going to explain these strikes and this action to the American people as well. There was a recent poll that was done by Quinnipiac University that stated that 70% of Americans believe that Congress should give the final approval for any military action with Iran. Obviously, that has not happened, but that is how Democrats feel like they are equipped to keep moving forward with their battle in this, which is to try and get some of the power back that Congress has. Hallie.
Julie Sirkin, live for us there in West Palm Beach. Julie, thank you. We'll take you to the region now, too, with the Israeli military saying it targeted some of those IRGC facilities, including the intelligence headquarters around Tehran not too long ago. Let me bring in Keir Simmons, who's back in Dubai for us tonight. And again, Keir, this is something where we would the IDF, the U.S., they have suggested that these attacks on these key sites in Iran are going to continue.
Oh, they are going to continue for sure. And what they're doing is trying to make it impossible for Iran to fight back. These command centers that they have struck, dozens of them, according to the IDF today, will be on a list, really, that they will be ticking off now that they have air dominance, that they are confident that they can go and bomb and not be blown out of the sky. And that's going to be the ongoing campaign to make it hard, for example, for a decision to be made in the Revolutionary Guard Corps to fire missiles, to decide to respond in one way or another. But what I think is interesting, and I was looking through the statement to see whether they will begin to target the kind of security infrastructure across the country. The paramilitary group, for example, the Basij that are underneath the IRGC, run by the IRGC, reported directly to the supreme leader, who, of course, is now dead. Now, just that one group. And here's the thing about Iran and the Iranian regime is there are many groups with tentacles across the country. The thing about that group is that it is a web of command centers and of posts around the country and of leadership structures. And that's why it's challenging to get to the point where the people of Iran who are against the regime decide that they want to stand up and act, which is what openly President Trump has been saying, that he has been hoping that this will bring about. That is where it gets it gets interesting, and I don't know whether they're going to be capable of that or have that plan.
Let me ask you this, Keir, or at least put this to you, because we've just heard from the press secretary literally in the last maybe 2 minutes as you were speaking. So I'll tell you what she had to say. That President Trump has spoken with the leaders of the UAE, of Bahrain, and of Israel as well. So President Trump, we knew he was working the phones, at least with reporters. We know that he is presumably working the phones now with these leaders of these other nations in the region that are obviously incredibly affected or part of this operation against Iran.
Yeah, and what's happened, and it's interesting. I'll just to make a note, by the way,
please.
You can hear it's quiet here in Dubai right now. We're not hearing the fighter jets. Haven't heard explosions for a while, I don't think. Sometimes you hear something you're not sure. So it's backfired on them, these attacks by the Iranians on these Gulf countries. Maybe they are changing course. Maybe. And if they are, then maybe it's too late, because it's very likely that there were fairly constructive conversations with President Trump, with these leaders. And the question is whether or not the Gulf countries will kind of swing in behind and be even more supportive of these attacks. They were, as you remember, warning in the weeks gone by of the real dangers of the way that this could escalate and spiral, and warning of their concerns about taking this kind of action against Iran. I mean, I'd love to have known what was said in those conversations, but
no kidding.
It's an example of the way things are really shifting. Yeah.
Keir Simmons, live for us there in Dubai. More reporting on that to come. Keir, thank you. Let me get now to Elise Labott, the author of Cosmopolitics on Substack. And Elise, we're glad to have you back with us. To this whole question of sort of the next phase, the next steps here, the Council on Foreign Relations had put out something cautioning against assuming that the death of the Ayatollah would mean cultural change ushered in Iran, given that this is only the second leadership transition since the Islamic Revolution back in 1979. Pull on that thread a little bit for us in the minute that we have left here, Elise, about the situation on the ground with the Iranian people specifically.
Well, I think, if anything, the cultural change will be significant, Hallie. Why? Because even though this was a system, not a one-man dictatorship, this regime has been badly battered across all aspects. They've never been weaker because of the protests, because of what's happened post-October 7th with Israel action. They're really on the back foot, and they're thinking of their survival. It's possible they could go after the people themselves, but now the people are seeing that freedom could be at hand. I suspect at some point they will go back in the streets, but I think they feel now that this is the opportunity for change. And I think, you've already been seeing that over the last few years, that cultural shift in terms of the Iranians having no fear, in terms of, the headscarves that they used to wear, things like that. I do think there will, it's not going to all of a sudden be this, city like Tehran won't be like Dubai, but I do think that is one thing that could change. I am worried about what the IRGC and the regime will do to crack down on the people, but I do think culturally we could see some change, and relatively soon.
And as you say, the response to any potential dissent is still very much an open question. Elise, we're so glad to have you with us. Thank you very much for being with us. And thanks to all of you for watching. It has been an extraordinary 36 hours here in Washington and around the world. We're going to have much more coverage online at NBCnews.com. And I'll see you later on tonight for Nightly News. For now, I'm Hallie Jackson in Washington. We'll see you soon.